Good morning, all. Brian S. Pratt here for another read of the Morcyth of the Unsuspecting Mage. We're now on chapter 25. After this we have chapter 26, then the epilogue, and then we're done. So 2 more days after today, and the Unsuspecting Mage will be fully read, edited, and in a day or so or two, I'll get it uploaded and get the changes online, which will be nice. Then we'll start in on Shepherd's Quest, book 1 of the Broken Key trilogy. Strangely enough, the last month, Shepherd's Quest has had a lot of downloads, which is a lot more than it really ever has. Maybe this is helping. I don't know. But it's kind of odd. All right, so a quick recap. They're in the City of Light. They saw one of the guys they saw the one man who escaped from when he helped rescue Parolin. The guy had a crosswire wire smack him in the face and has a patch over one eye now. And he recognized him. James followed him, wondering what he was doing there. And it looked like he was helping to... he was up to nefarious things, obviously. Bribing people, and then James was looking through a window and bam, got hit on the back of the head, which apparently I do quite often through this series, and I'm really trying hard not to have him being knocked out anymore, but yeah. All right, here it goes, chapter 25. Gasping, James came to as a bucket of water deluged his head. Next to him, Michael sputtered as he was treated similarly. His eyes opened, but his vision was blurry. The side of his head throbbed immensely from where he had been struck. He tried to move, but found himself tied to a chair with his arms secured behind him. "Who are you?" he heard someone ask. He looked around with far less than his normal 20/20 vision. See, I've got 20/20 as 2020-20, and I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I tend to write out my numbers. And in this one here, I have it as numbers. And it's very rare that I have it as numbers. But 20/20 vision, I really don't want to write that out. But it's about the only numeric designation I have in there. Everything else is alpha written out. Anyway, trying to see who spoke when a strap came from behind and struck him in the side, wrapping around his chest. He cried out from the pain inflicted, and that was when he realized his shirt had been removed. An angry red welt formed across his skin from the strap. When his eyes regained their focus, he saw the man with a patch over his eye step before him. The pain in his head exploded once more when the man grabbed his hair and yanked his head back. "Now," the man asked, his gaze boring into James's with his one good eye, "who are you?" "James," he gasped. "My name is James." He faltered on the edge of consciousness from the pain and started to feel like he was about to throw up. The man let go of his hair and asked, "What were you doing at the window?" Fighting back nausea, James tried to think of a good reply when thwack! The strap again scored along his side and created another red, swollen welt. "We were casing the place," Michael yelled out from the chair next to his. Turning his attention toward Michael, the man exclaimed, "You expect me to believe you are a couple of thieves?" He signaled the person behind Michael, and Michael cried out as the strap gave him a less than gentle caress. "Well, in the confusion of everyone leaving town," Michael explained, "we thought we could score big." Looking at Michael intently, the man considered what he said. "When we saw that there were people in here, we decided to find another place with no one around, and that's when someone struck us from behind." Michael continued, trying to sound sincere. "Perhaps." He walked to a table upon where their bags lay. He reached into James's backpack and pulled out the small amulet that James had picked up in Cardry. He dangled it in front of James and asked, "Then what are you doing with this?" James had to squint in order to focus his eyes well enough to make out what was being shown. "I bought that from a street merchant some time ago," he replied, when he finally made it out. Thwack! The strap hit him again, causing him to cry out. "He's telling the truth," Michael exclaimed from the chair next to him. "He just bought it to get away from the merchant." Thwack! A red welt formed across Michael's chest. "When I want you to talk," the man said to him, "I will tell you." The side door opened, and the man looked toward the door. Another walked in and came over, quietly talking with their interrogator. Whatever he was told didn't make him very happy. After a few more moments of exchanging words, their interrogator said to their guards, "Keep an eye on them until I get back." Angrily, needs a comma there, he turned and stalked out the door with the other man right behind. James leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes, trying to relax, hoping the pain in his head would go away. "James," Michael whispered, "you okay?" I'm going to change that to capital Y. Unable to answer, he just silently shook his head. James sat there with his eyes closed for several minutes before he heard a door open and close, then the sound of footsteps coming toward him. Opening his eye, he was afraid that it was going to old one eye again. When he saw who it was, he blinked a couple of times and decided he was either dreaming or having hallucinations. For there, walking before him, was Mickey Mouse. Oh, Mickey Mouse, yeah. Okay, I like Disney, I have to admit, and I thought this would be fun because, well, when gods and Igor, I suppose, interact with people, they have to do it in the context that they can believe. And Igor, he likes Earth. He does. He finds it very, very entertaining at times, I suppose you could say. James, he looked at his guards, and they've appeared not to notice the new arrival, even when Mickey walked right past one of them. "I've gone crazy," James moaned aloud. "No," Mickey replied as he reached up and removed his head. "You've not." When his head came off, it revealed a little creature who already came to him twice before. James laughed, though he was not sure why. "Come on," it said. "Let's go." "You're rescuing me?" "No," the creature replied. "Just borrowing you for a while." "Why?" "You can't stop asking questions, can you?" the little creature said to him. Unsure how to reply to that, he remained quiet. "Come on, get up," the creature told him. "I'm tired," James said. The little guy looked at him silently, impatiently tapping one foot. To show the little guy he couldn't get up, James tried to stand, and before he realized it, he was standing. Putting his Mickey head back on, the little guy turned and motioned for James to follow as he returned the way he came and exited through the door. Following him outside, James stopped suddenly and stared in absolute dumbfounded silence. "I know this place." "You should," the little guy replied. "You've been here often enough." "Mommy, Mommy," a little girl squealed with delight as she ran over to the little guy in costume. "It's Mickey!" She gave Mickey a big hug and posed with him while her mother took their picture. Mickey patted her on the head as she turned to him and said, "Bye, Mickey." "This is Disneyland," James said incredulously, staring down Main Street, USA, with Sleeping Beauty's castle at the end. "Okay, it's not Sleeping Beauty's castle, it's Cinderella's castle." And I really need to change that because I've gotten dinged on that so many times. And to be honest, I really thought it was Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty's castle. I'm pretty sure it's Cinderella's. Or Snow White. I'll look that up later. Yeah, the little guy said, "I love this place." He walked toward the heart of Disneyland, and kids came to him, giving him hugs and had their picture taken. "How do you know about it?" "I get around," Mickey replied. "Besides, those of us who gravitate to what you call good are drawn to such focal points in the universe." Disney is a focal point? Think about it. What happens whenever someone mentions it? Those around them feel good instantly. See a picture of it and you smile. That makes it a remarkable place. There are few like it anywhere. He paused to have his picture taken with several children, their mother simply aglow with happiness. Everyone here on Earth knows of it, and they continue to direct good thoughts toward it. It's almost a beacon in the night for those who can see it. Okay. Yeah, this one guy just tore me apart because he was saying, "You need to do your research. You know, Disney characters do not break character. They do not talk. They do not do this, they do not do that." And it's not a Disney character. It's Igor in a costume, right? Trying to impart wisdom to James that he's going to need at some point along his career path, so to speak. But this guy just wouldn't let up. He just kept going on and on about how horrible it was that I'm not doing research and I don't know what I'm talking about and I'm just stupid. But yeah, and I get that all the time about different things because people go into books with a certain preconception and they have their thoughts. It used to tear me apart and it used to really upset me. Oh, my mom would just go ballistic sometimes. How dare they talk that bad about her baby boy's book? But no, but people have their ideas, their thoughts, and so forth. And we just have to be understanding of that and just, let it go. It doesn't matter to me anymore. It doesn't affect me. Someone could rip me apart, and I don't really care. I've gotten a very tough skin, but at this point, where before it would put me into a depression. But if you get in this business, you're going to have to deal with reviewers. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is how it says. Let me go back. Let me go back a minute. Let's see here. It says, okay, everyone here on Earth knows of it, and they continue to direct good thoughts toward it. It's almost a beacon in the night for those who can see it. Now, spoiler alert. Beep, 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 beep. Okay, beacon in the night. Basically, the first book of Travail is called Light in the Barren Lands. Barren Lands is there because there's no magic on Earth, or at least James believes that. And Earth is a beacon because when it's a beacon of good in the land. Anyway, that's where that title came from, because it's a beacon of good in a barren land. Light in the Barren Lands. Because at the end of the book, that's where they end up, because they use the power of Disneyland to get to go home. Boy, that was a major spoiler, wasn't it? Well, people were warned. But I'm sure if they're reading this book now, they are not going to remember this when they get to Light in the Barren Lands. Probably. And if they do, I don't think it really matters. Okay, well, why bring me here? The little guy paused and glanced back at James before more children requesting a photo op could appear. When they were done, he asked, "Would you like me to send you back?" "No, not right now," James replied hastily. He was suddenly aware that his headache was gone, as was the pain from the wells. Also, even though he was bruised, possibly bloody, and without a shirt, no one seemed to give him a second thought. "Ah, look," the little guy said as he bent over to pick up something lying on the ground. He showed it to James. "Someone's lost their wallet." He walked toward one of the many workers and handed it to her, saying, "My shift's not over for a while. Can you take this to Lost and Found?" "Sure, not a problem," the girl said as she put the wallet in her pocket and then walked away. "Sad when something gets lost," he said to James. "When you lose something, you always hope an honest person will find it and work to get it back to you. All too often, though, you never see it again. Such is life." "I suppose it is," agreed James, not sure where this was going. From up ahead, a group of teenage boys came running around the corner, hell-bent on getting to the next ride before their fast pass expired. "No running in the park," the little guy yelled. "Up yours, Mickey," one of them hollered as he swung around and plowed right into James. Pain erupted in his head, and when he moved to get up, realized he was back in the warehouse, strapped to the chair. Though his headache had diminished somewhat, the pain of the welts across his stomach and chest, on the other hand, still throbbed angrily with every beat of his heart. Okay, so the whole point of that whole Disneyland thing was the wallet. That was really the whole point. He says, sad when something gets lost. Well, what's lost? The Star of Morcyth. So when you lose something, you always hope an honest person will find it and work to get it back to you. Basically, this is laying groundwork for him to realize he needs to recover the Star of Morcyth, which he doesn't learn was lost for quite a while. And, yeah. But yeah, I've gotten dinged on this whole Disneyland thing several times. I like Disneyland. And I put stuff in my books that I really enjoy that a lot of people don't really care about, I guess, or find stupid, or like, why do that? Why do it that way? Well, that's the way I do it. Okay. "James, thank the gods you're finally awake," Michael whispered with relief. "I was afraid you weren't going to." The room seemed darker, and there were several lit torches and sconces around the room that weren't there earlier. "How long was I out?" "A couple of hours or so," he replied. "I'm not entirely sure. Night has fallen." "Was it all a dream, then?" he mused himself. "Was what a dream?" "Never mind, I'll tell you later." Looking around, he found there were still only the two guards that had been there earlier. Yeah, had been. Yeah. Hang on a second. We need to get out of here before old One Eye returns, he whispered to Michael. I think that would be a good idea, too, he agreed. Magic? I'll try, James said, and then tried to concentrate, but the throbbing in his head made it nigh on impossible. He tried something simple and concentrated on one of the torches in the wall that was situated over many old crates and broken containers. The area looked to have been the dumping spot for anything that broke or was unusable. As James concentrated on the torch, it slowly rose from the sconce. He concentrated hard, focusing his will through the pain, and inch by inch it continued to rise higher until the bottom was no longer within the sconce. Gasping from the effort, he had it move a little to the side and then released the magic, allowing it to fall amidst the crates and boxes below. At first it looked like nothing was happening, but then smoke started to rise from where the torch had fallen. Now what? Michael asked, watching as the smoke grew thicker and thicker. We wait, he replied. Soon the flames rose above the broken wooden crates. One of the guards took notice of the smoke. He turned toward the growing flames and yelled, Fire! The other guard saw the flames licking the sides of the wall, and both ran over to try to prevent it from spreading. James tried to wield the magic to break their bonds, but his head was too muddled with pain to adequately concentrate. When he saw Michael look at him, he just shook his head no. Michael realized that James had done all he could, began to rock his chair back and forth until he toppled over. He then squirmed around and eventually worked free of the ropes. Keeping an eye on the guards, who by now fought a roaring fire, he untied James. Once free and with the guards preoccupied with the fire, they hurried to the table where their belongings were and retrieved them. The door on the far side suddenly swung open and old One Eye entered, coming to a surprised stop at seeing them with belongings in hand. The prisoners! He yelled, drawing his sword and racing toward James and Michael. The guards joined the chase, giving up on the fire, which by this time burned out of control. It now covered most of the wall and had almost reached the rafters. James and Michael raced for the far door and reached it before anyone could get close. Bolting through, they quickly lost themselves in the crowd outside. They didn't get far before people noticed the fire consuming the warehouse. Fire! They heard someone shout, after which it became total pandemonium. The crowd surged in panic as they tried to get away from the flames. People shouted, and those who fell were trampled by those behind. James glanced back to the warehouse and saw old One Eye standing at the door looking through the crowd for them. Move, he hollered when Michael paused in front of him to avoid being knocked off his feet by a group of frightened people in flight. Pushing him forward, they raced down the street away from the warehouse, dodging through the panicked crowd. After putting some distance between themselves and the fire, James grabbed Michael by the shirt and pulled him through a door into a dark and empty warehouse. They shut the door and sank down against the wall to rest as they listened for pursuit. Michael scooted closer to James and whispered, Maybe we should rest here for a while, at least until you're a little better. James nodded. Yeah, I always said nodded his head, but do you really have his head? James nodded and leaned against the wall. I mean, you don't need to say nodded his head, because when he nodded, obviously everyone knows his head nods. So why have his head? But I add a lot of back then I added a lot of superfluous words, and I probably still do it, but I think I'm getting better at it. The adrenaline rush he experienced when they escaped from the warehouse was quickly wearing off. I'll keep watch if you want to get some sleep. Closing his eyes, James lay down on the floor, and soon soft snores told Michael that he'd fallen asleep. Michael worried about his friend as he sat there in the dark. He listened to the noise outside, the sounds of people running and screaming. He remembered back to the times before he met James, when he would sit in the dark, hoping not to be found by the constables or some street tough. He smiled at his memories, even though not all of them were good ones. He sat in the dark for quite some time. The only light was from the fire that came in through the window. He went to it and peered. Several buildings adjacent to the flaming warehouse had caught fire. Crews worked to put it out. Though it still raged, it looked as if they had managed to stop it from spreading. Suddenly, horns sounded in the night, dozens and dozens of them. The people out in the street stopped what they were doing and raised their heads for a moment, listening to the horns as they blared all over the city. Then all hell broke loose when people erupted into motion. They raced in different directions, bumping into each other. Some got knocked down and trampled by the panicked mob, while others cried out in search of loved ones. Feeling this may be too important to allow James to continue sleeping, he gently shook his friend, rousing him. James, he whispered urgently, trying to wake him up. Consciousness was slow in returning. His head still throbbed, and he was unable to shake sleep's hold. What? He asked groggily. trying to retain his tenuous hold onto consciousness. There were horns sounding, Michael whispered to his friend. Horns? James asked, slurring his speech. Yeah, lots of them. Then it got all weird outside. James looked at him, giggled a little, and then lapsed back into unconsciousness. Damn. Realizing his friend would probably be out for some time, he made his mind up to get some food and find out what was going on. Making James as comfortable as possible, he slipped out the door and joined with the people outside. He hailed one passerby. What's going on? Looking at him like he was addled, the man asked, Didn't you hear the horns? Yeah, what does that mean? That means the Empire's forces have been sighted near the city and the gates have been sealed and barred. The only way in or out is by ship, but some idiot set fire to a warehouse near there and took out a good portion of the docks before it could be put out. That was James's fire. What are we to do? What are you, stupid or something? The man asked incredulously. We're under siege, boy. Not much to do but wait it out and hope for the best. Shaking his head, the man walked away, mumbling about the idiots of the world. Michael made his way to a market of sorts that sprung up near the docks. Merchants were selling all kinds of items, including food. Michael purchased a loaf of bread for the exorbitant price of $1.50 for one small loaf. When he tried to haggle, the man said, Pay it or go away. Knowing James would need it, he bought the loaf as well as a jug of ale for 5 silvers. Extortion, that's what it is, he muttered as he made his way back to the abandoned warehouse. To his relief, he found James exactly where he had left him. Undisturbed and still softly snoring. He sat next to him and ate a little of the bread for himself, drinking a small portion of the ale to wash it down. Then he settled in to keep watch for as long as needed. He managed to stay awake through the night, keeping watch over his friend. When the morning sun lightened the sky, to his immense relief, James stirred. Moaning with the pounding of his head, he sat up and laid his hand in his hands in the hope of keeping it from bursting apart. Oh my God, he moaned. What I wouldn't give for some aspirin right now. We don't have any of that, replied Michael, wondering what an aspirin was. He offered the bread and ale to James. But we do have this. James slowly nibbled on the loaf and drank most of the ale. How long have I been out? He asked between bites. All night. And I've got bad news. James looked at him questioningly as he ate the rest of the bread and finished the ale. Apparently, sometime last night, the Empire's forces were sighted nearing the city. He explained, pausing a moment to see what effects his words were having. Go on, James prompted. And they've shut the gates. No one is allowed in or out. We're under siege. I was afraid of that. When I'm done, we'll look around the city and see if we can figure our way out of here. He went to the bags and dumped everything out. Michael looked oddly at what he was doing. We're getting rid of everything but the most important stuff, he explained. 1 bag each. They sorted through what they had and finally winnowed it down to just enough items to give each of them half a bag. James took the money and divided equally between them. When he handed Michael his half, he said, just in case we either get separated or one of the bags get lost. Michael understood and put the money pouch in his bag. Now, James said as he got shakily to his feet, let's go see what's happening. He went to the door and peered out through the small window next to it. Seeing no one in the vicinity, he opened the door, and they made their way quickly into the street. Smoke still rose from the charred remains of several buildings and about a third of the wharf area. Man, what a mess, James exclaimed, shaking his head. At least we're alive. True, James agreed. They walked down the street, away from the smoldering wreckage. They heard the sound of horns sound outside the walls. All right, they heard the sound of horns coming from outside the walls. That sounds better. Coming from outside the walls, along with a whisk of arrows fired by the defenders atop the walls. All the townspeople were strangely absent, the streets vacant of the usual mass of people. As they continued along, a member of the city guard took notice of them and said, "No one is allowed on the streets. You'll have to return to your homes." "All right," James responded. "We didn't realize." The guard stood and watched as they turned around and headed back the way they had come. After going a ways, they turned down a side street and James came to a stop. "Damn," he swore. "I had figured on there being a curfew." He stood for a moment before saying, "Makes sense, though. Should we go back to the warehouse?" "Probably would be the best thing to do. I doubt if they are going to breach the walls anytime soon," he reasoned. "So we'll try again tonight when we are not so conspicuous." They returned through the streets to the warehouse, where they discovered a stairway along one wall that led to the roof. Hoping to get a good view of what was happening in the city, they climbed to the roof. They had a fair view of the city. The outer defensive walls rose higher than the warehouse's roof. Several thousand men lined the walls as all archers fired arrows down on the attackers. A crossbow bolt struck one of the archers, and he plummeted off the wall, landing with a thud on the street below. The roofs of many buildings throughout the city had a number of people on them as well, others having the same idea as they. Looking toward the remaining docks, James saw a ship disembarking soldiers and supplies. With the curfew in effect, there was no longer a mob at the docks fighting to board the approaching ships. However, there were several squads stationed in and around the dockside just in case of trouble. James, look, Michael said as he pointed to 5 wagons making their way toward the dockside. They saw that the wagons were loaded with many boxes and crates. An old man sat on the lead wagon. I guess Olener finally got his books packed. Glad he's going to make it out of the city. Maybe if we could get to him, he would take us with us, Michael asked, looking hopeful. James gazed out over the city at the many squads patrolling the streets between Olener and them. Turning to Michael, he said, I doubt if we make it that far. I've had people ask me, well, why is there a curfew? And I've always found that question kind of silly, but some people don't realize that, why there should be a curfew when the city's being besieged. Well, A, it keeps spies and other things from having free movement to do the dirty work. B, people aren't in the way of reinforcements moving from place to place. And C, it keeps town folks from possibly being killed. But I don't know why I have to explain that, but some people just don't understand that. I guess some people just don't, think through things. I don't know. But that is. I'm sure everyone who's reading this now, or listening to this now, didn't need that to be told that. But things occur to me, so I say it. Feeling disappointed and mad, Michael watched as Olener trundled to the docks and began to load the last of his books onto one of the waiting ships. The class of swords drew their attention to a section of the wall close to where they stood. Several attackers had managed to gain the wall, and reinforcements were running to beat them back. The fighting on the wall was fierce, but the attackers were outnumbered, and it wasn't long before the last one fell. A cheer rose from the defenders as the wall was once again secure. That was close. I'd hate to be up there, said James, as men removed the dead and wounded. They simply tossed the enemy soldiers over the side to land on their comrades below. The rest of the day progressed pretty much the same. The Empire's army stormed the walls, and the defenders fought back. Occasionally, the attackers gained a foothold on the wall, only to have the defenders cut them down, securing the wall once again. There were 2 brief respites in which the attackers withdrew, regrouped, and then commenced their assault all over again. They took turns sleeping while the other kept watch, and by the end of the day, James felt much improved. As the sun sank toward the horizon, horns blared from the field as the attackers withdrew. When it became apparent that no attack was imminent, the men on the walls rotated off in shifts for meals and rest. People emerged from their homes, and the streets grew crowded. Many made their way to the keep to see about loved ones who had manned the walls. It seems the curfew has been lifted while the assaults have stopped, observed James. This may be a good time for us to see about getting out there, if that's even possible. Do you feel better? Some, James told him. My headache is only a dull throbbing. He felt the bump on the side of his head. I think the swelling's gone down as well. Being able to rest for a day has done wonders. They came down off the roof, grabbed their bags, and left the warehouse to merge with the people now back on the streets. They made their way toward the docks and found that the east side had been cordoned off, watched by several squads of the city guard. They were told that area was for unloading supplies and men. James led them to the western side of the docks, where a mass of people had gathered. A man stood upon a wagon addressing the crowd. Are going to come and help evacuate the city. They will pull up to the dock, and at that time, in an orderly fashion, those at the head of the line will board quickly. Anyone, and I do mean anyone, who causes trouble or becomes a nuisance will be dealt with severely. Looking behind him, the man on the wagon saw the first of the rescue boats pulling up to the docks. He raised his hands to get the crowd's attention. When they'd quieted, he said loudly, "The first boat is here, and more on the way." He signaled to a squad of guards on the docks and said, "Start loading." When the crowd heard that, they surged toward the docks, pushing and shoving to be first on the boat. Do not push, the man said to the crowd. The boats will be coming all night long and as long as needed to get everyone out. One man pushed an old lady down and ran for the boat. A guard saw him and moved to intercept. The man fought with the guard, but was soon clubbed senseless. Take him away, the man on the wagon yelled. Raising his voice even further, he added, he will be the last one to allowed on the boats. When the people heard that I need a comma there. They became a bit more orderly, and soon a line formed as they waited for the first boat to fill. Other boats on the sea waited their turn to approach the docks to aid in the evacuation. Let's get in line, James said. Looks like we'll make it out of here after all. The boats were those of private citizens from neighboring cities. None were able to carry a lot of people, but slowly and surely the line continued to move. The sun dropped behind the horizon, and torches were lit to provide light for the people and the arriving boats. At one point, a boat loaded with evacuees sailed from the docks, and no new one took its place. Several minutes passed, and still no other boat approached to continue the evacuation. A low murmur developed within the waiting crowd. The man got back up on the wagon and addressed the increasingly restless people. Do not worry, he yelled over the crowd. They will return when they've dropped off their passengers at a safe port. More boats than what you've already seen are on their way. They must travel from cities farther out, but they will come. The crowd quieted and settled in to wait. Several more hours passed, and more boats appeared to take on passengers, and then quickly set sail, making room for the next one in line. Tattoo! Tattoo! The sound of many horns came from the eastern wall, as well as faint sounds of swords exchanging blows. The crowd around James and Michael grew restless, and the look of fear were on many faces. A rider approached at a gallop and halted near the man who addressed the crowd. My lord, the rider cried out. The enemy has breached the city. How? Someone poisoned the men at the gate and released the lock. To the guards, the man yelled, to the east gate. As he jumped from the wagon and broke into a run, the guards fell in behind. Well, the earlier chapter where they were peering in through the window and old One Eye gave some kind of pouch to people. Well, that was the poison for the gate, in case anyone failed to catch that. So it makes you wonder why this guy did that, and why did he do it on behalf of Lord Colloran? Or is he even involved with Lord Colloran, or is this a whole nother group of people besides Lord Colloran, right? We don't know. See, pieces are in motion. James doesn't know. He has not been informed. He hasn't figured things out. So, and will he? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see, won't we? When the crowd heard that the enemy was within the city, all thoughts of orderly evacuation vanished. As one, they surged forward toward the boat that was currently loading passengers. They swarmed over it, knocking each other out of the way and into the water. A knife flashed, and a woman screamed as she fell into the sea. They overloaded the small pleasure craft past its limits. The mass of people upon the boat caused it to tip, spilling everyone into the water as it sank to the bottom. The other captains waiting in line to pick up refugees, after having witnessed what just happened, turned their boats around and sailed away. They were not willing to risk their boats or their lives with a panicked mob. The people on the dock cried out for them to return, but to no avail. Then absolute panic set in as they realized that rescue was no longer forthcoming. People jumped into the sea and tried to swim while the majority just ran in every direction, trampling many of their neighbors. James and Michael flowed with the mob until they could dart down a side alley. What are we to do now? Michael asked, fear evident in his voice. Maybe we can swim out around the walls and past the armies. Michael brightened at the idea. Let's go. They made their way through the press of the crowd until they came to the water's edge. The sea was full of swimming bodies, many having the same idea as James. They got ready to enter when screams came from farther out in the water. Crossbow bolts struck those in the water, killing all who tried to escape. James could barely make out dozens of enemy crossbowmen lining the shores, firing at the helpless people in the water. Not this way, he said as they raced off into the city. And that ends chapter 25. So we're in the middle of the battle for the city of the gods. Old One Eye has poisoned the guards and opened the gates, which is bad for the city, obviously. James is stuck there. And now chapter 26 is the last chapter, and then the epilogue, and then we're done. All right. I'm really kind of excited about doing Shepherd's Quest. I haven't really gotten into that. You know, I wrote Shepherd's Quest in 5 weeks. I was on a roll. The fastest book I ever read. The words just poured out. I couldn't stop writing. Oh, if I could just get back to that again. I'm trying. This is really helping. I mean, doing these reads and talking to you people, and the few of you who actually respond and engage me in conversation, that really helps. That gets me excited. That gets me interested. I know. Okay, I just read chapter 25. The last chapter I posted was chapter 24. Only 11 people have read it so far. That's good, I suppose. I'm a little more discouraged. I'm a little discouraged about it because it's not as much as I was hoping for. But like when I first started writing, you know, I told myself as long as someone was interested, I'd keep writing, and I always made sales every month. They weren't many. My first sale, my first paycheck was $44. My lowest one was $7. I think I got like 1 or 2 sales that month, or no, not that many. No, more than that. 'Cause I wasn't making much per book back then. Anyway, but I'm actually enjoying this, so I'll keep going. I'll keep going. It helps to keep me focused. It helps keep me on the track. And thank you for those who are hanging with me, are actually interested in these readings, encourage me to keep going, and I'll keep going. I don't know if I'll get to the Fires of Prophecy, book 2, after this one. All my family and friends are saying, Brian, you cannot read and give these people for free what you're charging. So that's a thought, and so I'm going to read my free ones first, and then see where it stands after that. Whether I read the Fires of Prophecy. Well, one thing for sure, I don't think someone could make a professional audiobook out of what I'm doing. You know, if they could copy the recordings, because I'm all over the place. I'm blowing my nose. I'm talking about different things. I'm saying, I'm pausing, having, you know, I'm doing editings. I'm either talking about it or I'm pausing, and there's a quiet while I guess I could edit that out, but that would take an awful lot for books that really don't sell that well, and I don't get many sales a month. I'm barely hanging on as far as being an author goes, but I'm enjoying it, so I'm gonna continue. So chapter 26 tomorrow. You all have a good day.